The stars are coming out for a Philadelphia tribute to actress Ruby Dee and the late Ossie Davis at the 2005 Marian Anderson Award. Tonight, join Good Morning America's Robin Roberts, the world-renowned Philadelphia Orchestra, opera superstar Denise Graves, jazz legend Miss Nancy Wilson, Grammy-winning Philadelphian Jill Scott, and the inaugural recipient of the Marian Anderson Award, Mr. Harry Belafonte, as 6ABC presents the 2005 Marian Anderson Award. And now, from the Kimmel Center for the Performing Arts, Action News anchors Rick Williams and Monica Malpass.
Good evening.
And welcome.
Tonight, Philadelphia honors two accomplished Americans, artists, who have followed in the tradition of another celebrated American artist, Marian Anderson.
Ruby Dee and the late Ossie Davis created an artistic and civic tradition that is still making its mark in American theater and film.
And that's the mission of Philadelphia's Marian Anderson Award, to honor artists who have used their public role to shine the spotlight on humanitarian causes.
Ruby Dee and Ossie Davis follow in the footsteps of 6 previous recipients: Harry Belafonte, the late Gregory Peck, Elizabeth Taylor, Quincy Jones, Danny Glover, and most recently, Oprah Winfrey.
So let's begin. A sold-out crowd of fans, civic and cultural leaders are here to pay tribute to Ruby Dee and Ossie Davis, including tonight's host from ABC's Good Morning America. Here is Robin Roberts.
Oh, what a night. I am delighted to be with you this evening for this very, very special tribute. This is an amazing night for Philadelphia and for the arts, because tonight we gather to honor two incredible individuals, critically acclaimed artists who succeeded at every creative endeavor of their lives. Along the way, their activism and passion for fairness for all Americans helped push back the culture of racism that gripped the country for much of their early lives. What a legacy. Of course, I'm speaking of Ruby Dee and the late and certainly very great Ossie Davis. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand and welcome the recipient of the 2005 Marian Anderson Award, Miss Ruby Dee. Elegance and grace.
Welcome back to the presentation of the 2005 Marian Anderson Award.
And now, once again, here's Robin Roberts.
Actor, singer, activist, statesman. To whom else can I be referring to but our principal speaker for the evening, the conscience of a generation and inaugural recipient of the Marian Anderson Award. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Harry Belafonte.
Thank you. We are here to pay tribute to Ruby Dee and Ossie Davis tonight with the Marian Anderson Award, and I know that in a lifetime of public recognition, this honor, named for one of the beacons of their lives, has a particular and very personal significance for them. It is impossible to describe in a few words the impact that Ruby Dee and Ossie Davis have had on our culture. So let me begin by saying that Ruby and Ossie changed American life. I've known Ruby and Ossie for most of my life, as friends and as colleagues. And in all the years I have known them, they have been significant contributors to our culture and to our evolution and our national character. But for all the power that they have brought to the national dialogue on civil rights and a just and equitable society, the impact of their leadership in these areas is grounded in the artistic successes that lent even greater authority to their leadership. As a result of their groundbreaking work on stage, in film, doors that had been closed to people of color opened in the same way that Marian Anderson opened the door for generations of African Americans to delight in the world of opera and almost any field of their artistic endeavor. Through their choice of roles and the artistic work in which they invited themselves, audiences came to understand the reality of life for African Americans, real life as they have never seen it before. As a result, the consciousness of this country, it was raised in the stereotype of Black Americans the film and theater industry had fostered for so long became obsolete. One of the great miracles of the 20th century is that these two extraordinary people, who would have been remarkable in their own right, found each other, fell in love, and sustained each other through some of the most difficult years of this country's history. Along the way, they found time to leave us with some memorable artistic work and public acts of courage. Let us take a moment to look at these two extraordinary lives.
Whether acting, writing, producing, or protesting, for more than 6 decades, Ossie Davis and Ruby Dee walked the walk, risking their lives, their careers, and all the while remaining steadfast in their commitment to the idea that art and politics were as inseparable in their lives as they were to each other.
You almost got yourself killed last night.
I've done that before.
Ossie and Ruby first met in 1946 during the production of Jeb, a play about a black soldier returning from the war and facing racism. But it was their next play, Ana Lucasta, that gave them the opportunity to rehearse what would be their longest-running roles as husband and wife.
You're ugly enough. Don't stare at me.
It was during this time that Ossie proposed to Ruby by telegraph. The two were married in 1948. In a case of art imitating life, both made their film debuts in the Sidney Poitier film No Way Out, finding ironically that a movie that examined race issues had an all-white production crew, an issue they would address powerfully 2 decades later. Politically, their focus turned to resisting McCarthyism and helping the victims of blacklisting. Ossie and Ruby were also committed to bringing culture into the lives of organized labor, writing, staging, and directing theatrical productions for members of the Healthcare Workers Union, Local 1199. In 1963, Ossie and Ruby's relationship with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. led to their involvement in the March on Washington, helping to put civil rights at the top of the national agenda. Less than 2 years later, however, Ossie was asked to give the eulogy at the funeral of the assassinated black nationalist leader, Malcolm X.
Harlem has come to bid farewell to one of its brightest hopes, extinguished now and gone from us forever.
Ruby was busy making history as well, becoming one of the first African-American women to play major parts in integrated casts at the American Shakespeare Festival. Then, in 1969, 20 years after his first Hollywood experience, Ossie made his directorial debut with Cotton Comes to Harlem. There were still no blacks on American film crews, but this time around, he was in a position to do something about it. Along with Cliff Frazier, Ossie founded Third World Cinema to train blacks and Latinos in the filmmaking profession.
Don't you know that black is beautiful?
The following year saw a milestone in Ossie's life when he was asked to speak before the Congressional Black Caucus. In 1972, Ruby edited a book of children's poetry called Glow Child and Other Poems, and with Ossie teamed up in 1976 to produce the first American feature film to be shot entirely in Africa by black professionals, Countdown at Kusini. Through their family-owned production company, Emlyn 2 Productions, Ruby and Ossie spent the better part of the 80s producing innovative, influential, and award-winning programming, including their PBS series with Ossie and Ruby. And through their involvement in a number of films with up-and-coming director Spike Lee, Ruby and Ossie's work was introduced to a whole new generation of filmgoers and activists alike. Over the next decade, their work would include the stage, screen, children's books, and activism. For their range of achievements, they have received more honors than could be mentioned in a dozen tributes, including the Screen Actors Guild's Lifetime Achievement Award.
To lead,
to inspire,
and to challenge,
to touch their hearts and minds
with love's redeeming fire.
This is our right,
our duty.
This is our privilege.
Ossie Davis died February 4th, 2005. He was a cultural and political icon. He was a crusader and an advocate for 60 years. And Ossie left us with these prophetic words. Be not deceived, the struggle is far from over. The best of being black is yet to be. So said the ones who died to set you free. Today, Ruby Dee continues to pursue a life of artistic and humanitarian accomplishment, inspired by the achievements of a shared life and striving to inspire others. And this is why the 2005 Marian Anderson Award is presented tonight to Ruby Dee and the late and beloved Ossie Davis.
And now the moment everyone has been waiting for is almost here.
That's right. Ruby Dee will accept tonight's Marian Anderson Award right after this break, so stay with us.